Welcome back to the Science of Healing Summit. I'm your co-host, Dr. Shamini Jain, and I couldn't be more thrilled with our guests. I'm so excited for you to meet them. Some of them you may have met before, some of them may be new to you, but I have the privilege of knowing each of them, and I can tell you that what they bring to bear on their discoveries of the science of music and sound for healing is tremendous, and we're so lucky to have them all together for this discussion. We have with us Professor Jeralyn Glass, who many of you on the Shift Network may know from all of the wonderful courses that she's taught. She comes to us with a depth of wisdom, knowledge, and experience as a singer and also as a sound healer. Speaking of sound healing, you may also be familiar with Eileen McKusick, who we also have the pleasure of having guest host on this summit. She's a tremendous healer for many of you who've taken her courses and her work, discovering the links between the biofield and sound healing to heal literally thousands of people across the globe and train healers as well. We also have with us not one, not two, but 5-time Grammy award-winning artist, Victor Wooten, who is an incredible force of healing and wisdom in understanding how music connects us and heals us in all of these ways from a very deep spiritual place. He has 2 books out, which I highly recommend if you haven't read yet. His latest one, The Spirit of Music, really helps us understand how accessible music is for all of us. Thank you all so much for joining us for this panel. I'm just so delighted.
Very happy to be here. Thanks for having us all.
Well, thank you. And I thought, we'd started off with a quote that I just came across recently by a yogi, Paramahamsa Yogananda. Many of you may have heard of him. He was one of the yogis that really brought yoga to the West, but he had a really profound connection with sound, as many yogis and many spiritual practitioners do, because they understood the reality of sound and the connection with consciousness. And so Yogananda says this in his quote: "Sound or vibration is the most powerful force in the universe. Music is a divine art to be used not only for pleasure, but as a path to awakening." I thought we could start with just your perspective on that quote, given the work that you do and carry out in the world. Too often we think of music as just entertainment or time passing, and sound is something that is fun and lights us up. But this quote points to something much more profound than that. And I'm wondering how you see it. Jeralyn, maybe we'll start with you.
Shamini, that is a gorgeous quote, and it is so true. Music awakens a consciousness, a higher consciousness. I think of so many situations in my life where suddenly hearing, like for the first time when I heard Vaughan Williams, The Lark Ascending, and it's so, you're out in nature, and it's suddenly, I remember a moment hearing that driving my car, going up to a vocal competition when I was 23. And that piece of music put me in such a state of a deep sense of awareness. There was a revealing of deep truths in that moment, listening to that piece of music. And every time I'd listen to it afterwards, it would elicit the same kind of response. And I'm sure Victor, Eileen, Shamini, you too, we can go through that with many pieces of music that, I'm thinking of the Ninth of Beethoven. Da da dee da dee da da da. That melody that suddenly also brings something awakened inside of you. There's a deep spiritual context that can happen through great pieces of music. Puts us in a place that stills the mind. The mind isn't thinking anymore, and suddenly you drop into a deeper truth.
I love that. Victor, I'm wondering, what your perspective is as a longtime musician, performer. How do you see that?
I was lucky enough to have the privilege, I don't know, the joy of performing at a very, very early age, being the youngest of 5 brothers that play music. And so I learned very young how music can physically and literally move people. And in a sense, we run the risk of losing that freedom by talking about it. Really, always, we need to be dancing right now and discovering this. And then once we dance, there's nothing to discover. We feel it. And the thing about music, it doesn't have to be talked about. It doesn't have to be explained. And it literally doesn't have to be taught. We teach it so that we can talk about it together and we can speak the same language. And I'm not against talking about it, but it's something that we all know from every age. Every age. I keep these videos around on my phone to remind myself of these little kids conducting, dancing, singing, and they didn't study it. They didn't learn it. No one explained it to them. It's just a part of who we are. Because again, we're talking about vibration. But the cool thing about a musician, which I relate to a musician being a music shaman, is we get to study it and learn how to manipulate within it, within these vibrations. You don't have to learn it. You can just let it move you. Or you can just sing like we do in the shower or in the car on the way to work without really having to know anything about it. To me, that's the beauty about music and any kind of art. You don't have to know anything about it to enjoy it. If I write a math formula on the board, you have to understand math to recognize the beauty in it. But if you play a song or look at a drawing, you don't have to know anything about it and you still get the full effect. And to me, that's the cool thing about music or really any kind of art.
I love that point. I love the universality of music. And as you said, you can apprentice as a musical shaman, learn the language, do all these things, or you can simply be carried and connected by music in any way that you see fit. So it's universally acceptable, right?
Exactly.
Eileen, I'd love to know how you see it. I mean, you've approached this from many different perspectives. You're a singer too. You love, music in so many ways. And then you've also made all these discoveries with sound in the biofield as a practitioner. How do you see this relationship with music, the divine consciousness, and the accessibility to it?
Well, I think that, we're very fundamentally as humans musical beings. And in every culture, throughout time, music is such a fundamental part. And you think about life without music, and it's kind of unbearable, right? The thought of not having music at weddings or, any of the big things, but even just through our day, like if there wasn't no music, life would be pretty darn dull. So it's just such an essential part of being human. And it's a wonderful vehicle for liberation. That's what I've always been interested in, is how can we become more free as humans and more free to express our essential humanness through singing, through dance, through music. My approach has been a little different because I've figured out how to use tuning forks to find areas in the body's electrical system where we're frozen, where we're not able to surrender to the music or enjoy our own voices. Unfortunately, modern humans are all gummed up in this department. And it really is, I think, especially now more than ever, the medicine for what ails us collectively. And I think understanding better, like how and why it works that way, people who like the science of it, current research has really figured out a lot of what's going on in the body when we are exposed to therapeutic sound and to music. And I think that makes it even more real and acceptable for a lot of the left brain people out there.
Indeed, it takes me back actually to the days that I was an undergraduate at Columbia University studying neuroscience and behavior. And at that time, I had told everyone, I'm going to study music and its effects on healing. And yes, the brain is part of that, but like I want to study it on everything. Believe it or not, and that was in the early 90s, I guess, or yeah, something like that, early 90s. They thought that was crazy. But now we have multi-million-dollar NIH funding to study music and its effects, yes, on the brain, but also on healing. We have a thriving, discipline of music therapy. And I think each of you maybe touched on this a little bit. There is obviously a real deep connection with music and sound and our emotions. And so I'm wondering how, you touched on this a little bit, Eileen, with your work, but I'm wondering how that has come up in each of the work that you do as performers, as sound healers. What role do you think emotions and kind of opening to emotions plays in being able to take in the therapeutic benefits of sound and music?
Shamini, music really does have that ability to help us go deep inside, and suddenly you're crying. And you don't have to name it. You don't have to name what's going on inside you. It just touches you. It has that ability to go beyond where human touch goes, where our words go. It helps us to express this exquisite, this ineffable, this thing that doesn't really have words. Whether Victor was saying, you just get up and you start to move and dance because the music makes you feel so good, and suddenly you've been sad or been in a depression, and suddenly you're feeling joy in your body again because the music goes in, and it goes in. We say it gets in your blood, it gets in your veins, it gets in your bones. Music has that ability to uplift. It is the language of humanity. We don't have to speak the same language to understand music. And just singing in many different languages, traveling all around the world, and knowing that no matter what, music is that language that connects us, is something so it's universal.
I love it. I love it. Any thoughts, Victor, when you're, performing? We've talked a bit before about the connection that you might feel, right, with the audience, and obviously the music that you play and the choice of rhythms, the choice of, the tonalities, the modes, all of these things can have an effect on the emotions. So a musical shaman, of course, knows this. And yet, is there something more, anything else that you notice about this when you're in that flow, performing with people?
Absolutely. I think all four of us have realized that there's something more. There's something more than that's going on, and we're learning about it. Now we can see the shapes of music, even with cymatics and things like that. We can see, wow, it's not just flat on a page the way we write it. This thing is circular. It's beautiful. Um, there's a whole lot more to it. We think about music as going in a line and it reaches the hairs in our eardrums and we hear it. But music is going in every direction, right? It's not just one beam, it's everywhere. And like a wave, it hits you, but it also goes through you. So it's vibrating not just the hairs in your ears, but the organs, the blood, the air, and everything in and outside of your body. It's vibrating everything. And as I just said, or one of the characters said in my first book, once the vibration starts, it never stops. So we need to really be aware of the vibrations we're putting out there. And to me, that's what the study is about. That's why we want to learn more about it. So we can't not vibrate, but we can be more conscious and aware, and maybe even learn how to direct how the vibrations vibrate. And to me, that's what the study is about. I play music usually with a band. We're making people dance, snap their fingers. And to me, what Jeralyn and Eileen have done is they figured out how to take all of that I do on a stage in a concert and distill it into a tone, right? So some of us, if I'm listening to what they're doing with just my educated musical mind, I say, well, that's just one note. But if I can listen to it from the stance of the more we're talking about, I'm saying, wow, everything that I'm doing with all these other musicians in the orchestra is in that one note. And in a sense, it's more powerful because it's distilled, it's concentrated, So I'm trying to learn from all of you of how I can take all of this that I've done my whole life and go more with it. And I'll brag a little and say, I figured a lot of it out. Not all of it, but some. I've found out, wow, music can do this, not just make you dance, right? We can do some things that you may not even know is going on. And with that comes a responsibility. If you learn that you can do things, maybe even without the person's agreement, maybe, I don't know, we can affect people. There's a responsibility to it. And that's why, I suggest to the musicians that I get to work with, get really good at this. We love it anyway. Now let's get really good at it so that we can make the world better.
Oh, I love what you're saying. And The getting really good at this part, I mean, just to clarify, as a kind of recovering perfectionist, amateur singer myself, I actually left singing for many years because I was so perfectionist about it because I thought I had to be the best and be really good at it. But what you're talking about in terms of being really good at it is a completely different reframe, right? This is a completely different reframe. This has everything to do with consciousness, intention, love. It's not about making the perfect sound. It's not even about making the perfect shape on a cymatic screen. It's not about that.
If I could add one little more thing, Shamini, my mom would always say when us five boys were kids, she wouldn't say it in these exact words, but she would allude to the fact that we're going to spend all this time practicing and then eventually going to college, spending money, time, energy in anything. It needs to make everybody better, not just you. And in many cases, we're paying all this money so that I can get better. Nowadays, maybe to get a lot of hits on YouTube or Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. Right? But my parents pointed out to us very young that no, it needs to be more than that. Right? You're not sitting in a room all these hours of a day, sweating, working, getting blisters just for you. Because I can remember one time telling my mom, I don't remember exactly what I had done. It could have been I had practiced 4 hours or something, and I hate practicing. But one time I was proud of myself and I said, Mom, I did, whatever. And her response, usually she's the best praiser ever, makes you feel good about what you've done. But in this one case, she said, her answer was, well, what's that have to do with me? And whoa, it just knocked me back because I was like, oh, yeah, you're right. That's what you've been saying all along. But it just hit me. If all of this does is make me better, I'm not sure if it's worth it. And what I've learned from all of you is all the study and time that you're putting into it has less to do with just you, but has to do with you so that you can present it to the world and help the world. That's what I'm looking for in music, and my goal is to help other musicians, uh, you know, desire the same thing that my parents instilled in us.
Shamini, can I add on to that?
Please, Jeralyn, it would be wonderful.
Victor, yes, and I love the spirit. Your mom, incredible. When my son passed away almost 7 years ago, music was that thing that held me in a safe container that I could breathe and feel the loss without having to ever talk about it. But the music, I used the crystal bowls, and the crystal bowls created this space of safety that allowed emotions to pour forth that were not able to come through in any other way. And suddenly there was music as this framework, this symphony of holding the emotional body in such softness that it was able to express easily and effortlessly in this. Eileen and we have talked about this in this really subtle way. How does music and sound create these subtle energetic vibrations that suddenly you're going a place that you never thought you'd go? And then, Victor, to add on to that, that serves not just us, but the ripples go out and serve many. It's healing.
Yeah, Eileen, I love your perspective on this. And Jeralyn, you alluded to the subtle aspects. And Eileen, you've been studying the sound on the biofield now for literally decades, both as a researcher and as a practitioner. This link with the subtle aspects of sound and the healing that takes place. I mean, what have you noticed?
Well, what I've noticed that people really have trapped in their biofields, their frozen energy, is that it's really sound. It's trapped sound. Because most of us are raised in homes where we're kind of given an abstinence only approach to expressing emotions, especially ugly emotions. We're not allowed to express hate or anger or rage. It all just gets a lid put on it. And so we end up going through our lives just putting lids on all of our strong feelings. And we don't have a tradition of keening or wailing, with grief when people die. I mean, there's a reason why people let out all of that sound. And especially Americans, Europeans, everybody's so sort of stiff and buttoned up and full of sound that they haven't expressed. So a big part of our work in biofield tuning is finding these pockets of sound and getting them back into flow and encouraging people to express instead of suppress. And I can speak firsthand to the fact that Victor has figured this out with his music, because I had the good fortune back in October of seeing Victor perform at the Boston Symphony Orchestra. And I had a group of 7, I was with a group of 7 people, and 5 of the 7 people, myself included, all had very significant emotional releases after the concert. 2 of my female friends, they were up all night crying and throwing up and like just completely releasing sound. For me in the
sorry
car,
about that.
no, they were happy.
Apologies.
Like, it was what we want. We want to get those sounds out. I know for myself in the car on the way home, I just had sound explode out of me. Like if it was colored, there would have been this whole Technicolor splash all over the inside of my car. Like just so much sound, not so much crying, but just sounds. I was speaking in tongues. I was like, what is going on? Just that ability to use sound, to use music, whether it's a tuning fork or a bowl or a bass, with this sort of loving intention to kind of get things moving through us instead of being held. Because it's really these trapped sounds, these trapped emotions that we're holding in resistance that start to create inflammation in the body. And that's the root of disease. So any experience of sound or music that just gets us to relax and to release is going a really long way towards supporting our health.
Thank you for that. And I'm sorry for your friends that had such a crazy experience, but it's a good letting go, right? And I so resonate with what you're saying. For me, the way that I help people reconnect with sound, because we're talking about how universal this is and how we don't have to be proficient musicians. We don't even have to know how to play an instrument. For me, as a vocalist, I always go back to we all have voices. And, it's no accident that just like we suppress our emotions, most of us are taught to suppress our voice. We're not, taught to make certain sounds, especially if, again, like as you mentioned, Eileen, they sound ugly or loud or raw or whatever. There's a lot of it. And even for some people, expressing sound at all, even speaking up is an issue. So I work with people a lot on inner sound making and working with the voice, connecting with the elements, releasing emotions through sound. I love to teach people how to do that vocally. And I know that each of you have your own way. I was wondering if you have any practical advice for folks that are watching with us that say, well, this sounds really great, and I'd love to sort of tap into these subtle aspects of sound making for my healing. I don't consider myself, a bona fide musician, or even if I do, I'm just curious about some practical ways that I can start connecting with this. I'm wondering if each of you could kind of share a suggestion for a practice or something like that.
Sure. So it's important that you are in an environment where it's safe so that you can make loud noises, because a lot of times people are like, I can't, make noise. So it has to be whether you do it under the shower or you do it in your car, but you have to be careful, obviously, when you're driving. So that's not so recommended. But you have to find a space where you can make sound, or out in the woods, out walking. One really great thing is to box. So it's just to first allow yourself to just move your body, and let a sound come out with it. That can be very, very helpful. Sometimes when I'm working as a professor of voice, training people's voices, I'll have them do jumping jacks or push-ups and make sound. And it's miraculous. Their own voice frees itself. So when our intention is on movement, then the sound can come out. When I was working with the grief, it just, the keening, all of a sudden this feeling, and it was in a safe space and I was able to make loud noises, but this kind of groaning and deep release of emotional pain was able to express itself so easily through the entrainment with the bowls. So through matching sort of the sound of the bowls and just being held in that. So movement, allowing, this kind of movement in your body, this kind of movement, and allowing the sound to be what it needs to be without any judgment, without any considerations. And that's, a sense of you just turn off that station that's going, well, it should fit on that. Yeah, just turn that off and just let the sound have its free flow is a really, really important aspect of using sound and not having to be a musician to do that.
Thank you, Jeralyn. Thank you for that. Victor, any advice?
Yeah, sure. Um, we need to remember that what we call music exists in a very small realm. What we're really talking about is vibration, and there's not anything, I don't believe anything on the planet that's not vibrating. But if it vibrates within this realm where it produces a pitch or a rhythm, we call it music. If it's organized in a way that we enjoy, we'll call it music. But as somebody alluded to, you don't have to be musical or a musician. I urge us all to be musical. You don't have to be a musician to be musical. And a lot about music, being musical, is just expressing. It doesn't have to be right. Having to be right is screwed up too many people. Just do it. Like, children aren't singing and stuff to be right or to be good. They're doing it because it feels good. So if we can get back to that child state of doing because it feels good in a way that's not hurtful for anyone. And what I mean, like, what I might urge everyone to do the next time it rains, take your shoes off and go outside. If you can find a mud puddle, even better, right? And at that point, you'll be focused on the mud, and the sound that comes out will be natural. You won't say, oh, I've got to make this sound now. You just do something, and the sound you make is music, right? And to me, that's the best kind of music, which is the kind of music kids learn. I'm sorry, kids make until they learn how to do it right. So if we can find anything that brings us back to that natural state, the thing I like about Jeralyn is say, hey, let's just get out on the street and box. None of us are boxers. So we're just going to do it. You know, knowing that we're not professionals, we will allow ourselves to be kids again. And so in a music class, one of the ways I've been able to get musicians, including myself, to free up is we have a playing bad competition. Let's see who can play worse than the next person. And just at the thought of it, the smiles come out. And all of a sudden, the spirit of the music starts to come out because we're not suppressing it by having to be right. So I would say if there's anything that we can find that we can do that's not hurtful to anyone, go out in the backyard, in your backyard where no one can see you. As they say, dance as if no one's looking, sing as if no one's listening, or however that quote goes. Find things like that. And the sound that we make will be natural. But I think even more important than that is if we notice it or not, we'll be vibrating, which is, again, music, in a way that is so healing and so natural and so helpful, I think, to everyone. So for me, it's finding those things that make us childlike again. Now, if it's on an instrument, if we want to talk about music, there's other ways of doing it. But in this way, you don't have to be a musician at all. It's more just like being childlike.
So wise. Thank you. Thank you so much. Eileen, words of wisdom. You've been doing this work for quite a while as well.
Well, I think the childlike piece is really important because kids haven't learned yet how to suppress their emotions. They're like, oh, I'm happy, oh, I'm sad, and they just kind of go from one to the next, and they're not, they haven't yet learned to pull it all in. In my experience, I've worked with thousands of clients, Shamini, and really what I've found is that people come to see me for pain. Like, what's really going on is an emotion they're not letting themselves feel because we haven't been given permission to express or to feel, so we get hung up in like whatever our addiction is or whatever our drama is, but what's really going on are emotions that are being generated in our system as guideposts. Really, like, emotions are just like you touch something hot, you get burned, right? Your feeling sense shows you what's dangerous. Our emotional feeling sense also keeps us safe. And when we suppress our emotions, then we suppress our navigation for getting through the world in a healthy way. And so the more people suppress and block their emotions, the unhealthier they become. Uh, Pretty much everybody I've treated with pain, I mean, there's a small subset that have biomechanical issues, but the vast majority of people who come to see me with pain, what's going on there is an emotion. And so we want to have permission to give that a sound, whatever it looks like. I know for me in my practice, as I've evolved and become more free as a healer, I make the weirdest sounds when I'm working on people. Now I'll put a fork on somebody and I'll just feel the story that's there, and I'll start making that sound, and encourage them to start making sound. And when people can express these areas that are held, it's so liberating, it's so freeing, and it's so good for our health. And children already do that naturally. But if we want to understand proper emotional, I mean, obviously we don't want to be toddlers and have tantrums, but just knowing that emotions are waves and that they rise up and then they fall away, and that it's safe to feel them, and that it's safe, and finding a safe place to express them. Like Jeralyn said, like, it's so important for people to make the sound, but to feel safe making sound. Right. So if you're listening and you have pain somewhere, I would invite you to go someplace safe and express that. What does that pain sound like? What kind of noise is it making? And give yourself the freedom to be as ugly and as weird and as whatever as you want, in order to express that and to let it out. And it's such a relief when you do.
Thank you. I love that we have been having a really deep discussion on these connections with sound and music and emotions. It's really been a central theme of our conversation today, and a really relevant one, right? For all the reasons that we said. We as a global humanity need to be okay with working through our emotions. And I also just feel like it's great for us to name that, when I observe some of the greatest music, we began, our discussion, Jeralyn, with you talking about some of the master works, that arouse feelings in us, feelings of awe, even, and reverence, that's part of the emotional landscape too. And I go back to Paramahansa Yogananda's quote on, yes, music is for pleasure and for connecting with emotions, but also to connect with the divine. As we've talked about, music connects us. And I think of, in our tradition, for example, the different ragas and things that happen that are specifically created to connect and express the morning or the evening, or, or something like that. And so these musicians who took the time to be scientists in this way, to continue the deep study as each of you were doing, right? To explore all of the ways that we connect literally universally and can express that universality through the sound and music. I mean, it's absolutely beautiful. And yet, what I'm taking from this conversation is how incredibly accessible this is. That, we may not be a Mozart, we may not know how to compose a raga. That's okay, because our instrument is right here. And, some of what we've learned is you don't even have to worry about where to begin. Just, release, let yourself go, come back to the child that's ever knowing, ever present, right? That is going to allow for this to be expressed through you, because this is it's almost like a universal principle that is expressing through us all the time if we allow it to just be so. I'm so incredibly grateful for each of your work, and I'd love for you to share any other thoughts or reflections, any advice for the folks that are with us right now, exploring the depth and the beauty of sound and music for healing, from your point of views as practitioners and artists, as scientists of the craft.
Shamini, I'm just thinking first what you just shared, in that when you see a great piece of art, a gorgeous sculpture, or when you hear this exquisite piece of music, I was remembering when you were talking about that, the first time I heard Mirella Freni sing La Boheme, Herbert von Karajan conducting. And just, there were no words to put that human sound that she was able to make, that was just pure, exquisite, sublime. There's no words for it. It's like what Victor was saying at the beginning, when we try to put words around it, it's an experience that we can name divine. It's light, it's pure goodness, it's pure harmony. It's pure upliftment. What we talked about, this childlike wonder and awe that you look at something and it's like you look at a sunset, or you look anything in nature that's just exquisite, and it fills us. There's this vibration in everything, and that vibration is pure harmony that fills us with a kind of upleveling, a glow, a connection to the divine. You see a shooting star, you see the moon, the full moon, and the colors around it, or anything like that, and we all have the ability to take the few moments outside in nature, or to look at a beautiful piece of art or hear a beautiful piece of music, and our spirits are deeply touched. And I think this is an important practice for all of us, to remember the grace and the beauty that are available to all of us. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Beautiful.
Yeah, I'll add to that. Um, I think the same way we all learned to talk, we learn to talk sort of by not learning, not what we consider learning and practicing and all of that. No one's ever told you in speaking to go work on your voice, go practice, go find your voice, like we do in music. In music schools, they're always telling you to find your voice. When we were learning to talk, we learned it quickly because we had something to say. And the means to say it came about quickly. No one said you have to say it this way, right? It's not a blankie, it's a blanket. Go practice, right? No one's ever told us that, which is why we all have our own voice. We all have our own fingerprint. So wherever we came from, it doesn't matter what we believe, we came from somewhere. And wherever we came from, thought so much of us to give us something so precious that no one else has it. In the history of humankind's before, now, or later, this will never be here again. Right? It doesn't depend on whether you do something, to affect the world with it. That's not important. Nothing that can happens now can take away that contest, the biggest lottery or contest you've ever won, you ever been to, you've already won. So in other words, in a sense, wherever we're trying to get, we're already there. It's already been given to us, and here's the proof. It's like a barcode at the grocery store that says you're buying this product. They just have to scan that code. You've got your own. We're already there. The cool thing about being human is we have choice. I don't know if all the other life of animals and things have choice the way humans do. I don't know. We have choice of what to do with this precious gift. Now, with choice means to choose something good, you have to have something to choose from. That immediately invites, it brings about the opposite. So in other words, we're talking a lot about joy and light, but the opposite is true too. And I know there's people out there that aren't feeling that ease of just grasping love or being joyful. That's okay. You still won, right? At that moment, sometime years ago, life chose you. You're still a winner. Doesn't matter what you do after, right? So when we can be who we are, even in the pain of who we are, we're still a gift unto the world. We can't all be the savior. We can't all be smiling all the time, right? We don't recognize the smile really, or appreciate the smile until someone frowns. So just know that wherever you are in life, you are a part of the gift of life. And you're just as important as anyone else, the person who knows the way and the person who doesn't know the way. They both need each other. So wherever you are, musical or not, you're still a gift, right? Wherever you might think we know it all, and we don't, right? But even if we do know it all, we need people to tell it to. So so we all have a place in this life. And so for those of us that are out there struggling, and we all are, own it. Realize that's a part of who I am. It's not totally who I am, right? Totally who I am is that gift that was born that day. Out of all the choices, that moment, life, whatever you want to call it, chose me. I'm a winner. You can't take that away from me. And being a winner is not dependent upon what I do next. I've already won. So if we can remember that, that helps bring about a bit of peace, even in the midst of all the pain that life has to offer. But I just believe that part of being human is the pain, right? To move forward, you have to push backwards, right? You don't have right without left, up without down, black without white. For a slingshot to propel forward, it has to pull back first. It's just a part of life. And one of my favorite quotes, it says, everything will be all right in the end. And if it's not all right, it's not the end. So just know that you are a gift. Musical or not, smart or not, beautiful or not, you are a gift. And there's only one of you in all of time. So I hope we do good things with it, but you don't have to. Life has already done that for us by allowing us to be born, you know? So I say that just to release us all. We all, many of us want to be enlightened. We want to be the example and the leader. And that's a lofty goal. It really, really is. But you don't have to be that. Up until my mom's death, her license plate says, be what you are.
Oh, thank you. Victor, thank you. Beautiful words of wisdom for all of us.
Thank you.
Eileen, some thought from your side?
Yeah. Well, just kind of following up on that, being what you are. I think that what I've really come across a lot, especially in the sound healing community, is this obsession that people have with vibing high. And I always take issue with that and want to restructure the way that people think about that, because what that does is it takes away permission to be human. I think in the new age movement, I think really from every facet of life, not just new age, there's this pressure to be, you know, high vibe or Buddha like, or, eminently patient or whatever. And then when people aren't vibing high, then they feel guilty or they get down on themselves. And I think it's really important that people just have permission to be human. And you're gonna have a day when you're sad or you're angry or you're rageful or whatever. And that this is the song of our lives. If it was all like upbeat and happy, that would be inane. Like we need the contrast in life. We don't appreciate the highs without the lows, and that it's okay as a human being to feel really bad, because it will pass. It'll pass. The song changes. It just does. The journey changes, and the song, life changes of its own accord sometimes without us having to do anything. And so I think that's the beauty of having music, is that if you are feeling sad, that you can put on a sad song and really be sad, instead of putting on a happy song and trying to make yourself happy. That it's so important to just be free to be feeling whatever you're feeling without some kind of expectation and thought that it needs to be different or cleaner or higher or better or any of that. Because when we add guilt and judgment on top of what we're already feeling, that just makes it even more impacted in our being. So I think music, because it expresses all these different emotions, gives us permission to just be human instead of trying to be divine all the time. I mean, certainly we get to have those experiences too. I've had incredibly divine and transcendent experiences through music, but I've also had a good cry, face down on the floor too. And it's all good. It's all our own unique human experience that nobody else has ever had or will ever have. And it's all beautiful.
Ah, so well said. Music as the expression of consciousness, and all of it is divine. Mm. Thank you all for joining us, for sharing your wisdom, your light, your spirit, and your practice. I know that I've benefited tremendously from this conversation. I know that each of you have benefited as well. Those of you watching, we invite you to kind of step into your own beautiful musical flow and know, as Victor said, that you've already won.